The Democratic Alliance says voting for the ANC in Gauteng is equal to giving your vote to the EFF. The party has held its Gauteng Provincial Elective Conference where Solly Msimanga retained his position as provincial leader. The DA has set its sights on a moonshot pact to try and unseat the governing ANC. Political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi joins me now for some insight into this. Professor, good morning and thank you for making the time on the Sunday. Let's talk about the re-elected leader, Msimang. Firstly, his utterances that he wants to unseat the premier of Gauteng, Banyazeli Sufi. How likely is that, given how the coalitions have gone in Gauteng and the mess it has been really in the last while?
Hi, good morning, Williams, and good morning to South Africans. Very interesting, fierce announcement made by the DA, newly elected leader of the DA in Gauteng, but that is expected. You won't get any leader who will go in a battle without demonstrating that his or her party will come out victorious. And it's exactly what is happening here. But for me, that is a far-fetched dream. And it started when the DA announced its moonshot pact, where already it seems as if the DA will dictate to other parties. The very same thing that I try now to correct with these coalition governments at local government level. The question is, how are they going to get it right at provincial level? And secondly, another layer is, who will be partners? Who will be partnering the Democratic Alliance? Because already they're now sidelining the EFF, which is the third largest party. And the question is, even if the ANC gets below 50%, I do not necessarily think that suddenly the DA, with whoever is going to support its vision, will be able to rule or lead Gauteng province.
Professor, let's talk about those numbers. We know that the voter confidence has waned in the nation as a whole. Here in Gauteng in particular, we are expecting the ANC to lose quite a significant number of voter turnout. Be that as it may, does the DA's utterances of saying not voting for the ANC is almost like voting for the EFF? I mean, where does that place them in the voters' mind?
Well, I don't think that will help them. We should look at the South African electorate. And I think the statement that the DA is actually making is that it's a public pronouncement that the Democratic Alliance does not want to associate itself, does not believe in anything that the EFF stands for. And we've heard about talks even at provincial level between the so-called marriage between the African National Congress and the Economic Freedom Fighters, and perhaps that's where the Democratic Alliance comes from. But if you look at the proportion of votes of the EFF, and I don't think the ANC will now get below 40%. It's not going to happen. Besides the ANC in Gauteng, irrespective of the challenges that the party is facing. Yes, if you look overall, the ANC generally has been shedding electoral support, and the same is going to happen next year. But I do not believe that the DA has the muscle, because elections are not won based on these pronouncements. Elections are not won on emotions. You need to go on and have foot soldiers. And it will take a while to completely unseat the ANC. They may just get below 50% because your provincial, especially these metropolitan urban areas, and a province like Gauteng has in the past illustrated that the electorate is really dissatisfied with service delivery, governance, and the way institutions are being led and managed in that particular province. But is that enough now to give the Democratic Alliance and its partners an opportunity to lead? They give them an advantage, but definitely not an outright advantage to rule that particular province.
I then have to ask you this, Professor. I mean, what sort of strategy should the Democratic Alliance put in effect if they want to win voter confidence in the province?
The Democratic Alliance are striking the right chords. They're talking about institutions that have collapsed, lack of good governance. These are issues that any typical South African do understand, lack of basic service delivery. We all know about this. But fact of the matter is, the Democratic Alliance, whenever it makes these public pronouncements, the moment if they can take a backseat to say, we have initiated the moonshot, but let us give other political parties an opportunity also to dictate terms, and that is not forthcoming. And that's why in my opening statement, I questioned the rationality of having, for me, it's almost like a vision how to deal with the power of the African National Congress. And that is to ensure that in terms of the agreement that will emanate after the general elections, is that parties agree on what needs to be done. What is lacking, service delivery and all that, and then only decide on who is going to lead those particular portfolios. Unfortunately, the nature of politics in South Africa does not operate in that way. Politics of the stomach still reigns supreme. We can say it's not business as usual, but there's still corruption at every single little corner of this country now, public institutions, local government, and that is where the problem is. That's not how politicians and some of our public leaders are seeing how this will pan out, and that is something that the Democratic Alliance will need to. It's actually a challenge that they need to see how they're going to navigate around them. But the posture of every democratic leader, even at a local level, is that it seems as if it's our vision, and you will have to toe. And I don't think political parties will want to buy into that.
And of course, Professor, to that end, they go into more talks around the Moonshot Pact this coming weekend. Will they then look at perhaps considering the other smaller parties, with the exception of the ANC and EFF, whom they very outright said they do not want to work with?
Yeah, no, but one also had to cast the net a little bit wider, look at Mmusi Maimani's independence. Already 24 have been announced. And we know, because these independents will never be able to compete with your formalized political parties, which perhaps has the foot soldiers who can do the campaigning. But already that is eroding the power of the opposition. Yes, to a certain extent, they may take away votes from the African National Congress. But you also have other new political entrants. And I've said, if you look at the political landscape, our political landscape has been saturated in terms of the number of political parties. And I don't think any of these new entrants will completely disrupt our political setup, but to a certain extent, they do take away votes, and the issue of voter turnout is also a huge problem. Yes, they can work with smaller parties, but I don't think those smaller parties will have enough electoral support to even challenge the EFF and the African National Congress should they go into bed.
And before I let you go, Professor, is there a certain tone that the party needs to consider moving forward if they are to really, I call it, win the hearts of the voting public?
Yes, I think the Democratic Alliance and all our opposition parties also needs to start somewhere, and to demonstrate that they are highlighting all the flaws within the ruling party. But the question is, to what extent do they demonstrate wherever they are ruling? And in terms of our local governance, we've seen how things are collapsing at municipal level in terms of this coalition government. What tone, what precedents, and what examples are parties like the Democratic Alliance setting to convince South Africans that this can work out at provincial level. I think South Africa is bleeding. South Africans are yearning for good governance and alternative to try and enhance a basic service delivery and good governance in this country. And it is the opposition that can perhaps deliver on this, but so far they have not demonstrated that they're capable of doing that.
Professor, I do thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for chatting to us here on eNCA. That was political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi live here on eNCA.